Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sunday Superversive Livestream. I'm your host, Ben Wheeler, here with my co host, Anthony Marchetta. Last week, as you may be aware, um, we challenged each other to watch and/or read two of our favorite, one each of our favorite shows and/or manga. I chose Blame by Tsutomu Nihei for Anthony Marchetta. Anthony chose Dennou Coil for myself. Um, Anthony, since I laid out the challenge, which one would you like to talk about first?
Flip a coin, eeny, meeny, miny,
No,
blame, or blam.
okay.
There you
Okay,
go.
there you go.
I
Thank
was
you.
just thinking to myself, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. All right. Don't don't mess with me like that, Anthony. All right. So you read Blame. It's been a favorite of mine for many, many years, like a decade or more. Um, It's a very formulative work. I always keep that aesthetic sense in the back of my mind. What did you think about it?
I think that my thought on finishing Blame was that Blame was a work of genius.
Mm,
Uh, it was a work that it just absolutely stuffed with ideas. Like so many interesting, fascinating ideas, but it's very weird and kind of confusing to follow. And I think it ended well. I saw like there were a bunch of people once they this in a recent trend. A bunch of people were like I read criticizing the ending of Blam, and I don't really get why. For the ending is very strange, but on the other hand, it seems to fit logically into the framework of the story, and it makes sense as far as a solution, to the issue to the main conflicts of the story go. So I thought the ending was quite good. Uh, I suppose if you wanted me to say absolute 100% a critic of the ending, I will say this. It ended in a way that resolved the story almost like more neatly than I would have expected a story this vast and complex, but that's also not a bad thing. So, and that doesn't
hmm
seem to be what people were criticizing either. So, I still am not really I can't say I agree with the criticisms.
I've
But my
mm,
overall impression of Blam, I keep calling it Blame, it is Blam. That's how it's pronounced, even though it's spelled Blame, is that it is a really, really, really interesting story in the best sense of the term. Like, it's always just fascinating to see what new ideas and imagery and things the mangaka is going to come up with.
hmm So, what was your favorite arc?
My favorite arc. That's a good question.
My personal
Uh,
hmm?
go ahead. Sorry,
My
you
personal
go
favorite,
first.
and a lot of people I've seen agree with me, is the Domoshevsky arc, um, where they meet up with another safeguard agent, not Sanacan, by the name of Domoshevsky, and between the three of them, Domoshevsky, Sibo, and Killy, the main character, they fight their way through Davin Luvenega, uh, his minions. He has a quirky mini boss squad, which was just fantastic, and rescue some data from Davin before he fully accesses the net sphere and does undescribable damage to it.
Do you know about what chapters they would be from?
So, not really. I think in arcs, not like necessarily chapters. Um, so like if we think about Blame, there's about 10 chapters or more of him just wandering around having adventures. Then there's the arc where he meets Sibo, and they fight and destroy the city authority. Then there's the Fisher arc, and then the Toha Heavy Industries arc, which is also a really good arc. Like it's honestly a tie between that and Domoshevsky, where they meet up with um oh my goodness, they
If
meet
if
the
you're going to ask me for names, I'm horrendous with names anyway, and like I said, the
I
story
need it.
confuses me, so
I
I
honestly
won't be
should
able to
reread it.
help you with names.
No, that's fine. Well, they meet up with an AI
However,
android
I know what
knight.
you're referring to, so I get your point. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have the wit. Like, to be clear to everybody listening, like I finished Blame quickly, like a few minutes before we did the chat, while I was going through the wiki with it, because I was trying to make sure that I wasn't lost following it, and it was all very, it felt very trippy to me in my head, uh, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So I know like everything that Ben is referring to, but I'm also trying to like make sure that I understand him properly. And I have Domoshevsky pulled up, and now as I'm going, like, oh yeah, that was awesome. So,
That was
so
awesome.
yeah, yeah, Domoshevsky was really cool. The his gun is apparently, from what I'm looking at on the wiki, the gravitational beam emitter apparently became like an iconic part of Blam.
Yep. And he fires it off like once a chapter or so, and it's always
He fires it a
ridiculously
lot.
epic. Yeah, he does. It is fantastic. Every single time has weight and motion to it. Whew. Mm.
Now, as I'm looking at, I have in front of me. I think I had like chapter 5 or 6 pulled up on my phone, and I saw. And the reason I mentioned chapter 5 or 6 out of nowhere is because I just saw a shot of him saying like he has a gun and he shoots the gravitational beam emitter, and it looks as if it bounced off of a wall, which is weird because that's not normally how the gravitational beam emitter works. So I might be misreading something. See,
So,
this is
mm,
the impression that I'm. By the way, this is me reading Blam all the time. Me reading it going, wait, am I understanding this correctly? That is my constant experience of Blam.
now you see, I
It's
bought the 6 volume Master Edition, which I'm pulling off the shelf, so you and I can go over this together. Honestly, I just wanted an excuse to read Blam. What chapter are you on?
I had crap, now I can't find it. It was like the chapter that for some reason was on my phone. I think because I was reading it on my phone at one point, then moved to a computer or something, was like chapter 5 or 6.
Does he have the guy tied to his back yet?
No.
Is he fighting the Silicon Life?
He was going to crap. He I know exactly what he is, but I don't where he is, but I don't know how to describe to describe it because the city is so strange. Okay, chapter 5, I think. Well, he's traveling through. They're showing him to like a market or something, and then they go. He has a gun, and he shoots them. He might have been carrying someone, but now I don't have the chapter pulled up, which is annoying. I
Okay.
had apparently I had apparently turned it off. Whatever. This is really unimportant. It's just a matter of you mentioned the gravitational beam emitter, and I just remember that being one of my earlier impressions of it.
So
There,
like,
it.
mm,
Yeah, go ahead.
so like the gravitational beam emitter, like based on the art, honestly, he often has scenes where you just have panels dedicated to the shots of the GBE. So like
Yes,
you'll
and they're
basically
always amazing.
always. So like you'll see it go through like a wall, then it'll show it coming out the other end of the wall and piercing the next mile or so of architecture. And by the way, there's no end to the architecture whatsoever. The architecture goes on forever. Um, like early on, like so. Here's the thing about it. There is clear art evolution throughout this work. What do you think about it?
The art gets better, but it gets better from a baseline that was already pretty good.
Sure.
Uh, it very much feels like a horror story, even though I'm not quite sure if you could class it that way or not.
It is horror. I would not
There's at least
hesitate to
body horror.
yeah. So like I'm of the opinion that sci-fi and horror are like tsundere in a tsundere relationship where sci-fi will pretend not to be all about horror, but in reality, like horror is the yandere sneaking up behind sci-fi and like cropping up in all its family pictures. You know what I mean? Like
Yes.
like like the book I'm writing right now, Time Stop King, is not explicitly horror. However, I do have a werewolf transformation scene so disgusting that it made a reader like shout in shock when he read it. Like just go ugh. So it's like it's there all the time. But people don't want to tap into it that often because they don't really know how to handle it. Like Night Flyers was a good example. Where it had a lot of horror elements, but sometimes they didn't want to let us dwell on it for a while. Like they wanted to get back to the science fiction, not the horror, even though it was the whole point.
Now, Blam is interesting because, I mean, yeah, I guess I would agree. I would say that Blam is a horror novel. It feels very bleak, but in a weird way, it's not very bleak. I mean, it starts off in a bleak place, but it ends with the main character accomplishing his almost impossible stated. Like, he has a mission and he completes the mission. He wins.
Yeah, like
The end.
he finds the net terminal genes. How he gets them is super weird, but he finds them.
Yeah, he gets the net terminal genes, and it's implied that they can stop the growth of the city. And
Yep.
it's like, uh, I guess that's a happy ending, then, isn't it? I mean, he even survives somehow.
Oh yeah.
It's like 3,000 years old at that point, or something absurd like that.
Oh,
But
well over it. Like he's just ridiculously old. Um, Here's a good one.
one thing with Blam is that Blam has shockingly little dialogue. There are the early chapters, especially like for the first 3 or 4 chapters or so. When I say early, I mean really early. But the first few chapters have like almost no dialogue, just vast shots of Killy, walking through. For some reason, like the wiki and everywhere calls him Killy, but in the manga itself, he refers to himself and people call him Kiri. So I don't really know what they're going for. It's kind
It's
of strange. I I I'm just going with Killy because that's what everywhere refers. Like the wiki refers to him that way. Descriptions of the story, all of it
the movie.
Killy. Even though in the manga, yeah, even though the manga he's repeatedly referred to as Kiri. I don't really get it, but yeah, Killy. It's just long shots of walking through the city, going past all of these weird cybernetic life forms and things.
Yep. And then when the violence does happen, it's weighty, it's powerful, it feels like somebody got messed up. Whew, it's fantastic.
Sorry, my mic just got turned off, but I was able to fix it before uh, I got cut out of the chat for once, which is like super rare. Anyway, yeah, the violence in Blam, he's really really good at making it seem very impactful.
Right.
Like it always feels like you're kind of wincing you feel the weight of the blows and the weight of the shots, and everything feels very important.
Mm-hmm.
Killy, I saw him described in I think a review of the Netflix movie. They described him as like a Clint Eastwood character, and actually, now that they say it, it makes way too much sense. That actually is a pretty good description of Killy. He's like a Clint Eastwood, man with no name type character.
Yep. Now, who's a better Clint Eastwood archetype? Jotaro Kujo or Killy?
I mean, Killy's in the better story.
As ooh, ooh.
I would say. So, are any of I don't know if JoJo ever gets anywhere near the consistent heights that Blam sits at
Yeah,
until we reach the end part of part 6 and part 7.
that's true. So,
So yeah,
yeah,
on the other hand, Jotaro Kujo is a lot simpler of a character,
yeah,
and he's clearly just designed to straight up be Clint Eastwood.
yep. No, it's pretty good. Like I'm looking through the last manga volume where Sanacan gets upgraded and goes back one final time to save Sibo from the Silicon Life Society. Do you remember that rampage?
Mhm.
That was pretty sweet because it's been a lot of like them fighting on equal terms or better than the main characters, the Silicon Life people. So each battle against them is like hard fought, but these people like the net sphere is just acting on automatic processing. It's not actually sentient, I guess. It's sentient in a way, but it's not going against any programming it was ever coded into itself. But these things are actively trying to promote chaos in the net sphere, and they're the most persistent enemies of Killy and Co. So I always find that scene fascinating. So,
Yeah, the you might notice that I'm having a problem talking about Blam, not necessarily because there isn't a lot to talk about, but because there's so much to talk about that it's really, really hard to discuss, and a lot of it also it was really cool. Uh, so, like, this is the opposite of an issue with Blam. Like, it's not that it's light and there isn't much to talk about. It's that there is so much for me to talk about, but it's also dense. It's really hard for me to know, like, where I'm starting, except that, you're bringing this up and going, don't you remember that? I'm going, yeah, and it was cool. That, that's, I agree with you. Uh, that was I mentioned to you right before we started, like, these sorts of really dense sci-fi stories are not the sorts of things I normally read, and I had a similar issue, and quote unquote issue, because it's a me issue entirely, with John C. Wright's Golden Age series, that it was so dense and so full of fascinating ideas that I felt like my head was spinning and I had to keep rereading it to figure out what was going on. And when it came to Blam, I was like following along with, looking up characters on the wiki as I read about them to try and make sure that I understood exactly what was happening. So it's going to be hard for me to say anything like super concrete. I guess I could say, I don't know. I like the ending. Like I said, I thought it ended in a very satisfying way. I was actually, a little surprised at how optimistically.
so this is kind of like a game for me. Describe the ending and the plot points that give someone who's listening to this make sense of the ending.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. I got this. I have an article on the net terminal genes up in front.
Oh my goodness, you're just cheating.
It's not an article linking to the ending. It's an article of the net terminal. So Shibo Shibo dies after a big fight, and it's really badass and cool looking. And she's defending an that's like has her DNA in it with I actually don't even know what was the other DNA.
Uh,
Whatever. Shut up.
okay.
Uh,
I could. It's fine. All right.
uh, hold on. And Shibo has this orb that has like, and it's called and it's like her child. Or it's implied to be her child. The wiki all calls it Shibo's child, but it was clearly like her genes. And
Right.
she says that this is going to, if Killy brings this orb that she has protected in her final battle to a safe environment, the her genes and the genes of the person she's combined with are going to give birth to a person who has access to the net terminal gene. And the net terminal gene is the great big MacGuffin of the entire story. And it's the whole reason that Killy did any of this. And the idea is that if you have the net terminal gene, you can now access the city, like the software, I guess, of the city, and you could order it to stop building.
Yep. You could basically make all humans legitimate individuals within the net sphere.
Right. That's the idea behind the end. That's a fairly good summary for as far as that goes. I think that's a pretty good summary. Shibo in a fight defending this orb that she had made, and there were like alternate timelines involved, crap like that. And it was
Yeah,
really confusing. And
it was.
there was at one point alternate Shibos,
Yep.
but by
But
the end of it, she has this orb that's made of her genetic material and somebody else's who I don't remember,
Sue,
but I'm sure he was a great character.
he was
Who
the
was it?
knight for the AI.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember him now? She keeps
Yeah,
resurrecting him, but he gets a little bit worse each time because it won't
yes, I do.
restore its brain. It's great.
Which is actually a really cool idea, by the way. But anyway, and which again, that's kind of like my main impression of Blam is everything is a really cool idea that could probably like make a book on its own, just like completely separate from the rest of it. Like that alone is such a good idea that you could like make a short story out of it probably.
Right.
But whatever. So Killy takes the genetic material and eventually, like we see, the genetic material starts to grow. So the heavy implication is that Shibo's child survived and is going to be able to access the net sphere. Now, after that, I assume there's going to be a lot more work that will involve a lot of traveling throughout the city to try and get everything to calm down, but I don't really know exactly how the cybernetic aspect of that will work.
They have to do it
I
level by
guess we
level.
never will.
Oh, it's Bar One Studios. Hey, hey. So, like, first off, using the wiki is cheating. But
I was only
secondly,
using it to look up what the net terminal genes were. I did not look up the arc.
just call them the admin passwords,
Yeah, that's true. I
right?
just wanted to make sure I understood it right, but I did. I did
Right.
anyway. I didn't even need to do that.
So, like, uh, the way I always describe it is that a software engineer with a gun that shoots in a range that's literal miles has to find the admin password before all human life is exterminated. That's it. That's how
I
I
mean,
say it.
that's as good of an explanation as you'll get. Now, the movie adapted an arc apparently of the manga,
Hmm.
but
The
I don't know.
Fisher arc.
I may give the movie a shot. I may give the movie a shot one day.
I do recommend it. It's got less ideas in it than Blame, and it's less dense, but it loses some things in the process. and they try to make it more character driven when Tsutomu Nihei can't really write characters for crap. So, you know. Uh,
Yeah, I guess if I did want to give it a criticism, that's true. Its characters are kind of bloodless. Killy's cool, I guess.
right. But like there's a certain level for it when you don't need much complexity from your characters. To have like too much complexity in a story like this would, in my opinion, excuse me,
It
hurt
would
it.
probably hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would probably hurt things more than help them.
Yep. So would you
I
recommend?
mean, would I recommend Blam? Yes, absolutely. I would recommend Blam, though I will caution everybody that if you're going to read it, you either need to have a different personality type than me that allows you to, that you'll eat all of this stuff up, or take more than a week,
I mean,
uh, or
I
both.
I enjoyed every minute of it. Like it's I pretty much I didn't understand all of it the first read, but I got enough of it to super enjoy it. Like this was back when I was failing out at Rolla, and I did this instead of studying after my grades just got so bad. I couldn't do anything about it, and the like it just kind of hit me the impact of it, partially because it connects with how I view myself when dealing with hurt and pain and stuff like that. You know, like what your arm blew off. Okay, well
Yeah,
you could
I
read.
suppose there's a whole metaphorical angle to Blam that you could take if you want to do that, though I'm not sure if that's an intentional read by the creator or not. I mean, you don't need to go the metaphor. It's a metaphor for depression route or whatever for the story to make sense. It's cool enough on its own. Though I suppose if you really wanted to, you probably could.
Yeah, like the thing about like reading into things, I don't actually pay attention to any author's intentions. Like, as long as the story isn't explicitly evil or evil aligned, I will I will accept whatever the story presents rather than what like excuse me. I've been up since 5:30 and it's 8:09 p.m. 5:30 a.m. So like the way I view stories is that whatever you're manufactured to be by life and what interests you, you will write a story based on essentially what God has inspired you with. You are a vessel for the story as much as you are the actual writer of the story. The reason why there's so many authors with one work or one good work is because that is the only story they ever have, and likely it's the story of their life, but metaphorically, which everyone has that story. Most of it's miserable and boring, but it exists. Your experience is recognized and valuable, at least to you. Um, though that's me being mean. So, like with Blam, I I saw a lot of myself in Killy, and while I didn't like, I'm not one of those guys who like puts myself all the way into a character. I saw him as sort of like a metaphor for my life. It's a struggle. It's got a whole bunch of like pain and kind of like loneliness to it. But ultimately he succeeds with whatever task he's given to do, which is more important than all the rest of the stuff because it benefits the greater good for people rather than destroys uh, life, essentially, which is what the Silicon Life and the Net
Yeah,
Sphere Authority
the
wants.
Blam the other strange thing about Blam, and this isn't strange in the same way, but like Blam is surprisingly optimistic for all for how bleak the tone kind of is and the visual style and all of that. It's really
Hmm.
not a nihilistic work in any sense. it's actually ends like on a pretty optimistic note, all things considered.
Yep. And even
Like I
if it,
said, if I did have to criticize the ending, it's that in a story this complicated and this grand and with so many different things going on, it was a pretty straightforward resolution of the main conflict, but that's also not a bad thing. It resolved it in a logical way.
absolutely. And honestly, I enjoyed it. And once I fully like rocked the ending, it's honestly one of the best endings I've read. Um, I'll link a few like manga music videos that I thought were absolutely amazing in the chat. Uh, but Anthony, we have spent more than enough time with blame. Let's talk about Dennou Coil.
Awesome. So Dennou Coil was my suggestion because uh, the reason I suggested Dennou Coil, first off, coincidentally, it ends up being a great contrast with Blam. And this
Mm-hmm.
was like literally entirely unintentional. Neither of us had any inkling in our heads, at least I don't think you did, that these two shows were, or these two media were to have anything at all to do with each other. I picked Dennou Coil practically out of a hat. And the reason I picked Dennou Coil is because I have shows and movies and things that I have in the S tier, which is the Speedwagon tier of shows. I don't do number rankings because I think that number rankings are always seem way too inexact to me. Like I'll rank something a 7 of 10, but something else I'll also rank a 7 of 10. Except wait a minute, that's clearly better, so that should be an 8 of 10, or.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I put them in tiers. Dennou Coil is in my highest tier, the Speedwagon tier, and it is a show that came out in 2007 and there were two shows that year that came out that were really, really good. Gurren Lagann and this. Gurren Lagann is also in the S tier of shows. And they like awards. Thing is, even though Dennou Coil did very well in Japan, it really didn't do much of anything overseas. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until 2016, like 9 or 10 years later, Dennou Coil got its English dub. And it kind of got a cult following because critically it's extremely well received and everybody who watches it seems to like it. It's just not watched as much as I thought it should be. So, with that very long introduction, Ben, what were your main thoughts on Dennou Coil?
So it is a good anime. However, I do not consider it anywhere close to my S tier. And I've got several different reasons for it. For one of them, it was too long for what the story could actually bear. It's 26 episodes, and I could, with an editor's pen, probably cut 10 of them. Some of them, you could make a good argument to keep them, especially, um, especially some of the ones where they're having fun and interacting with each other, or the episodes where it focuses on Daichi interacting with other people. Some episodes that could be cut wholesale. The Beardy's episode,
The
the
beard episode's the one of my favorite episodes in the entire show. The beard episode is hilarious.
it's Anvilicious is all crap, Anthony.
It's hysterical and
It's
it's great.
it is the entire thing is justification for an author to go on an anti war rant.
Yeah, but he does it in the most bizarre, silly
He
way
does not.
possible, and it's
He
so
doesn't. He
cool.
doesn't. He does it in the same way that I've read it from every other sci-fi author. You get a civilization that's observed by the main characters, and then have the civilization almost destroy itself, if you have a nihilistic worldview. They are then removed where they can work together in space, and then usually either disappear or evolve or do something that makes them better or different from humanity.
Sure, but they're doing it with the legal creatures that are growing in beards on the main characters' faces.
And
That's
I've
also one of the more famous episodes of the show, by the way.
That's so
Not
weird.
that that matters, I'm just pointing that out.
I almost dropped the show over that episode. Like it was horrible. Like like the second that they started fighting each other, like I was like, oh no, oh no, this is gonna be an anti-war thing.
I also remember the one that I remembered actually even more than the beard one. Really, I learned later that the beard one became famous, but I remember the one where or the illegal, was it a dinosaur? Like
Yeah,
the illegal dinosaur to another East base, and I remember that episode being pretty good.
it was bad. Like the fact that the dinosaur was gonna die was a foregone conclusion. It would have been better for the
Well, so
dinosaur to
what?
live.
That doesn't matter.
Yes, it does.
That's not the point. The point is that they're children. It's a tragedy. It's a foregone conclusion to
They're
us, the people
surrounded
who are
by
watching it,
tragedy.
but not
They're
them.
already surrounded by tragedy.
Yeah,
Several
but
characters. Like,
that's not the point though.
why
The point
traumatize
is that they're
Denpa?
looking for a way to save the dinosaur, but they can't. This connects to the main story of the series, accepting that you have to let some of these things go. It eventually becomes like a precursor of what we see with Densuke.
Counterpoint. Wait, what? Densuke? What's
Yes,
what's Densuke do? That makes him.
when Densuke ends up dying.
Who's Densuke? I thought Densuke.
The
Oh no, that's
dog.
Daichi. Oh, Densuke.
No,
Okay.
no, no, not
So
not
no, I'm
Daichi.
good. I
Densuke's the
mixed up the
dog.
characters. All right. So Densuke, yes, sort of. The problem is that the plot line is resolved by somebody who won't let things lie.
I'm not sure what you mean.
So I need to look up the names. So the main character, what's her name?
Yasuko.
So Yasuko, she goes after Asaka. Um, wait, Isako, excuse me. So Isako has gone into the net terminal, uh, and interfaced with the underlying architecture of the virtual world. Digimon, digital monsters. Uh, so she literally does not give up and saves the person. She does not give it up. She does not stop trying, and it works out for her. They even have hints of Densuke running around several times after his death, barking, or they see an illegal that's just following around and then disappears again. Like it's not even um so just so you know, it's an A tier at best, like a low A minus tier for me. Um I don't know. I wouldn't say C's like I don't know. B tier. B tier then if C is average. B plus.
That's the
I'll give
way
it a
I
B
think of it
plus.
anyway. That's the way I think of it anyway.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is my own rating system.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm trying to use your like thing so we can talk to each other about how we feel about it.
Yeah,
So like
but
here's the thing. If I was them, I would have cut out wholesale chat uh uh episodes 12 through
I'm
17.
looking up the episodes, by the way, as you're speaking, because I'm trying to make sure I watched so that I knew, so that I remembered the characters and the ending. I watched episodes 21 through 26, like in the background while I was doing other things, just had them on in the dub. By the way, Dennou Coil has an excellent dub, and
It is
if
actually pretty
anybody
good.
cares about that, it's a really shockingly good dub.
So like I've just talked about what I disliked about it, and like honestly, to me, these things are probably bigger than other people treat it. But to me, it's like somebody like is playing guitar super great, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, guys, now we're bringing out my cousin who plays the tambourine, and the guy just comes out and plays tambourine for like 15 minutes, and you're sitting there going, what? Or it's like watching a band tune for like an hour. Like I actually like me and Jason when we went to Dragon Con one year actually like had to set through that because we really wanted to hear this band we had never heard of. So like the guy starts going, imagine imagine going through life, imagine this, imagine that. And then I get fed up and I go, imagine a band that plays music. And he's like, don't get me started. And I go, I wish you would. And he's like, ah. And he
Wow,
started playing like 5 minutes later. It's like
that's pretty funny.
I don't come here to hear a band tune. I know you're in a stage, but I'd rather hear a band that just needs to tune up for like a minute and then plays even if they're a little bit off key than um whatever. It's so there we compared to like Wesley and the Crushers, another band we saw last year. This was 2 years ago. Um, like they just set up in a hallway and started playing. Dragon Con official, but like just they didn't spend like more than 5 minutes tuning. So a Buckethead concert, if I knew that band, I'm gonna agree with you. Absolutely. So certainly episode 13, certainly the beard episode. Um, like the the Daichi stuff was pretty decent. I didn't like not enjoy it, but like from a narrative perspective, it didn't need to be there. Like like when Dennou Coil is good, it is absolutely fantastic. It is great. They're the episodes where they're haunted by the phantoms of the net dead. Oh my goodness.
Yes, that was. I mentioned this to you when I was in passing, and I found the episode number. It was episode 19, the Black Visitors. That's Kyoko is taken to the other side, and Yasuko and Fumie need to go and get her back with Densuke. That
Hmm.
episode, I remember watching and going like, "This is unbelievable,"
Right.
and it is. That episode specifically is maybe my favorite single episode of the show,
I hope so.
which
It's
shows that which shows that I like as much as Dennou Coil. A lot of the episodes kind of blend together for me.
Yeah, like
Uh,
I actually watched it pretty much as a stream of consciousness, and like
mhm.
I enjoyed it. Like it that
Yeah,
that's probably the superior viewing experience.
the Black Visitors is the one where I remember that episode because okay, we went through a little bit of what Blam was about. So before I talk about the Black Visitors specifically, which is episode 19, and I have that Wikipedia list if you want to know, that's where I got it from, by the way, if you want to look one up yourself. But anyway, I'll explain briefly the premise of Dennou Coil, which is that in the future, augmented reality has become like a daily part of life and has become so and everybody wears like glasses that project 3D images in front of you that are so lifelike you can't distinguish them from the real world unless you take the glasses off. And
Hmm.
the show does this from a child-centric perspective, which is really an interesting choice because all of the main characters in Denny Coil are 11 to 13-year-old children going
Hmm.
all the way as young as 4. Yeah, with the youngest member of the cast. And it's all about them like they're urban legends about the cyber world, and they move to a city that's like the center of the new AR revolution, and there's a conspiracy going on about illegal spaces in the city and people dying as a result of using the technology and possibly getting stuck in the virtual world, which is known as the other side. And in typical kids show fashion, all of the urban legends turn out to be true in some manner of speaking. So going that's the premise of Denny Coil. And in the Black Automaton, or I'm sorry, the Black Visitors, Black Automaton's a later episode. So in the Black Visitors, there is an episode of the show where three of the main characters, Yasuko, Kyoko, and Fumie, are staying at the home of Yasuko. And Kyoko is Yasuko, our main girl's little sister. She's like 4 years old. Yeah. And actually, she's a pretty realistically written toddler. I appreciate Kyoko as a character.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
I think Kyoko is a very well written toddler character. She straddles the line of annoyance perfectly. She's just bearable enough for me to deal with her while still having me believe that she's an actual toddler, who are all really annoying. Sorry, young parents.
I guess. Like,
So
keep in mind that like when you have your own kids, it's like a dopamine rush every time you look at them. So you put up with it and don't strangle the little blighter.
yeah, probably with me. Point is, I think Kyoko's a very well written child character as far as they go, like 4-year-old character, a pretty realistically written one. And she gets trapped in the virtual world on the other side, and they have to go in and rescue her using their with the help of their virtual dog Densuke, who, as it turns out, is like a special modded dog from one of the created by one of the scientists in the company that creates those dogs.
Hmm.
And they have to go in and rescue Kyoko from the other side when she's in an illegal e-space, and like every if you're touched by the illegals, your glass destroyed and you could potentially get stuck. And the entire episode is filmed like a horror movie. Like it seriously, the whole thing kind of Dennou Coil kind of transforms. And Ben, you mentioned this earlier about how sci-fi and horror are
Hmm.
really close, or tend to be really closely related. And
Yes.
I love the way that they did that, how they turned it into a horror movie, and then they sort of lean on the horror movie aspect of it for the rest of the show too. Because up into the finale, they pretty it's pretty straightforward that the other side, I guess the coil domain, is literally just like the land of the dead. And by the time we reach the finale of Dennou Coil, it is barely in the realm of science fiction and is practically a fantasy at that point,
Yep.
which is one of the biggest strengths of the show, I think. That it is able to me that it still all feels like it fits in this world, even though we've literally turned into like she has to travel into the land of the dead where she finds her her dead cyber dog, and she finds her friend who now needs to decide if she's going to stay in the on the other side with her dead brother forever, or if she's going into the real world. And they have like a fig leaf of science fiction here to connect it to, to keep it out of the realm of fantasy, but it's all very much like it's practically a fantasy story at this point.
Yep.
So you
Science
mentioned
fantasy.
something, yeah, you mentioned something about how you thought that the ending of Dennou Coil and the ending of Blam were similar in some specific ways. What did you mean specifically by that?
So they have an interesting sort of look to them. Both are cyberpunk-ish stories, but while Blam is more definitely science fiction, by the end of it, Dennou Coil is a little bit on the science fantasy side of cyberpunk. Ultimately, cyberpunk is not as connected with reality as people like to say it is. Usually you get something like the godly hacker. I don't mean like godly as in he's a Christian. I mean like the top tier hacker. Or you have that weird warrior monk from Neuromancer who was a ninja, and like they blind him, but it doesn't matter because they're like, yeah, we used to have him wear a blindfold and he'd catch knives for us, and it's like, oh, okay, all right. Um, there's a whole bunch of ways you can look at it there, but what's similar is that both have life and human value to not necessarily to the protagonist's ideas, even though Oh, what's her name again? Like, here's the funny thing. Like, I'm I remember the plots like very, very explicitly, but I can't remember any of the characters' names. When Yukiko, Yasuko. There we go. When
Main
Yasuko,
character is Yasuko.
yeah, when Yasuko goes after Isako in the digital realm, Digimon, uh, she. I'm not going to stop making that joke. Um,
And he shouldn't. It's a good joke.
right. Uh, she sacrifices herself potentially for the greater good of Isako, and in sort of proxy for everyone else, because without the influence of Michiko, a lot of things that are spooky and hurtful towards humanity will disappear and become honestly less prevalent. Even the illegals will not be as um, all over the place with Michiko no longer controlling them or, uh, sending the ghosts of the dead after people. The blame is similar. The main MacGuffin is finally in Killy's hands. All he has to do is get the embryo, the genetics, the whatever it is, her, um,
Right.
to a uninfected part of the city, no matter the cost to himself, and it'll become a child capable of uh, putting in the admin password each level she goes. I wish it was a better thing to say, but it's like literally the admin password walking. Um, it to get there, he overcomes so. This is like Dennou Coil is more emotional. Like it is an emotional story by the end of it. It is not cerebral and it's not violent. If you looked at the
No.
series of music videos I put down in the links below, like the final chapter of Blame is Killy literally climbing up after a pit and destroying something that's coming after him, and he just lays there in the rain for a while. Now, up until this point, there's been almost no water in this story, so it feels different from the other chapters. He walks through it where he comes across a version of himself, a past version, that they sent after him as a hunter, that was hinted at a couple pages before.
Hmm.
They have a one draw shootout where Killy is, for all goods and purposes, as close to death as we've ever seen him, and we've seen him lose 60%, 40%, excuse me, of his body mass, because his brain's been blown out. Instead of him getting back up to fight, water washes him up into the system till eventually he comes to a place. I assume he doesn't need to breathe, otherwise that would get real awkward. He comes to a place where there's no infection corrupting the genetics of the humans within it, releases the egg, and it, produces the child. While the no coil isn't as, I'll say, metaphorical as, or I don't know, like here's the thing, they're both pretty simple and explicit. You, Yasuko and Isako, which by the way, like people are like, oh wow, their relationship's so interesting, but it's like they only had like a handful of scenes together, and it's mostly Yasuko going after Isako, not the other way around, which also bothers me, but I can't quantify that as much as I can the episode structure in the middle bit of the
When you
series.
watch the last few episodes of Dennou Coil, Yasuko and Isako are actually spending a lot more time together.
See, it's like by that time though, I viewed it as like the final arc. I wasn't, I
That
wasn't.
was the final arc.
Yeah, I know, but like, okay, so there's like the arc leading up to the final arc. I view the couple of episodes, the episode or two that Yasuko spent inside the digital realm, Digimon, uh, as like its own little thing because it's completely separate from the previous three episodes or so. and it's
Yeah, they're
clearly the final battle.
yes. The relationship between Yasuko and Isako, uh, it is honestly, it needs to be remembered that everything needs to be filtered through the fact that Dennou Coil is one of those shows where all of the children are, at least generally, written as children. This
Hmm.
includes things like their emotions, their jealousies, and things like that. Isako is a good example of this. When you first meet Isako, the impression you're supposed to get is that she's a genius arch bitch. Yeah. And it becomes clear relatively quickly that Isako is actually just a very angry, very sad girl whose brother died and who's scared and trying to figure out what she could do about it, and who also happens to be very bright,
Yep.
and and learns hacking very well. So this all connect, and the reason this is all connected with Yasuko is because even those the emotions that had her, that led her to staying on the other side for such a long time until Yasuko was able to kind of snap her out of it and bring her back, all stem from things that happened when her and Yasuko were like 5. You
Hmm.
know, Yasuko kisses her brother on the lips, but Yasuko kisses her brother on the lips as like a 5-year-old. And to be clear, Dennou Coil is not one of those shows. Uh,
It wasn't even on the lips. It was on the cheek.
I thought it was.
No.
It really doesn't matter. Like it was a little kid who had a crush on an older kid, and so kissed him on the lips because that's what she probably saw an adult do. There was nothing to it, right? But
Yes.
the sister of the boy, sees this happen, and she idolizes her older brother, and she sees that somebody else is getting his attention, and this makes her upset and jealous. So everything is at its core, like all of the emotions trapping them there are extremely childish. And they're treated that way. Like this is not a flaw of the show. This is something that is explicit. They
Hmm.
don't say it word for word. It's extremely childish, but it's obviously intentional. And
Hmm.
Yasuko is kind of able to break her out by pointing that out to her. Like in not so many words, I think what she says is, "I thought you were supposed to be brave. You're not supposed to be afraid of all of this stuff." But there's this element of this person telling you that you hate this girl for stealing your brother is clearly very stupid. Like objectively, it's dumb. She was a 5-year-old girl who had a crush on older boy, and you were a 5-year-old girl who just didn't want somebody else playing with your brother that much, and then he died at a bad time in your life. It's an arrested development that she had to break out of. So I think that when you talk about their relationship being interesting, what you need to understand is that it's interesting because of the time that all of this happened. Just happened to be like a very influential time in their lives. Everything imprinted on their brains and became, was magnified to be a much bigger deal than it was. And then this all got heightened even more with tragedy. So it's not so much that it's interesting because it's doing something new, it's interesting because of the time of life that this relationship formed is the only reason that it's significant at all.
One of the things, like, you're
Does
absolutely
that make
right.
any sense?
No, it always makes
Like,
sense. Like I like it's like I always had that. I got it. I grokked it. Um, I don't. I don't know. Sometimes when I see, so like I wrote a book that was mostly had children characters in it called Tears of
mhm.
Elfland. Um, I made very careful attention to their characters and patterns of speech. Um, just shameless self plug here. Um,
It's all relevant.
yep. So like the reason why I was very careful with how they talk is that that's the in a novel, that is your main interaction with those characters. I have Mika, the youngest talking member. She talks, and then like her brother will say something, and she understands him because she's intelligent. But like he'll be like, yeah, this is a fairy trick. She goes, fairies, and then she runs around trying to find fairies, and she's like, that's not fair. And he's like, I didn't mean there were fairies. Now someone's tricking us. And, oh, Rick, and it's like one of those things where it's like she's going on the adventure, and then her brother admits that the adventure is there, so she gets excited, and then like her brother's like 9 years old, but he's got kind of a like he kind of got messed up because their mom died, like all the rest of them did, and like he's serious, and he's like, yes, it's a fairy trick. Fairies. It's like then later on they meet fairies, and she has like childlike interactions with Granny, goodness gracious me, with the Fairy King, with the Goblin King, and so on and so forth. But I also make sure that she's also like a girl and, you know, has interactions with her other family members. Then I move it up with like Lucy, Edmund, and Susan, who Lucy being the middle child, I literally almost gave her no characterization just to let that middle child syndrome really set in. But she gets her own chapter where she shows off her athleticism as well as kind of, like she doesn't have a drive like all the rest of them kind of do, but she does not want to let her family down. Then I have Edmund. He's the actual smart one. He has a game of wits where he gets the frog guy to drink both Toad guy to drink both the poison goblets. But at the same time he bickers with his family all the time because he's the bickerer. Like that's his interaction with his family members. Peter's the oldest, he's the leader. Susan's the second oldest, so she's also the leader if Peter would let her. Um, and they all like interact with each other. To have a story where all the kids interact with each other as kids, even with like different ages, like you do in this series, it's a hard thing to do. It's very hard for me to get the tone right, partially because I wasn't really a kid growing up. Or I'm still a kid and trapped in a mental cycle I can't break free. Don't think about that, Ben. Trapped in the mental cycle I can't break free, and what is it? Uh, so like I don't like I like kids in the sense of I enjoy being around them. They're very fun. You can tease them a bit. Um, like but I don't really interact with kids. Um, like it's weird. I don't know.
Now,
It's the
go
point
ahead.
is that these felt like children. Um, these did feel like characters interacting with each other. Kyoko gets a crush on Daichi, who's like this loudmouth, like 12-year-old boy or whatever. Um, so she follows him around, and he's trying to get into adventures, and his dad like bullies him by walking around naked in his house like a Chad. Uh, but there's a filter on it, so you don't actually see anything from Daichi's perspective. He just knows that the guy's just walking around. Uh, like there's all these interactions with these characters and their family members that you know works. Like Isako being easily led around by Neko Mine's lies works. Neko Mine trying to like his plot is actually kind of a weak point because it basically comes down to him blackmailing Megamask to let him do whatever he wants. But
Well, he's trying to blackmail Megamask because he's trying to clear his father's name, who I think they blamed for like the original Imago disasters, that led to them
yeah,
destroying the E-spaces. And he has his brother helping him, and then his brother turns you know.
hmm the problem with Neko Mine is that one, we learn about Imago a little bit late in the plot for my tastes. Even though we see examples of it earlier, like the concept of it doesn't really play into it as much. Yasuko also develops Imago powers eventually, and I was like, did it? I don't know if it needed to happen. That's my problem. That was my problem with
What
that.
happened with yeah, that scene was I think they were being chased, and and Isako tells Yasuko like, do not get imago powers, and they I think Isako collapses, so Yasuko gives herself the imago powers, and Isako is just like, you're insane, this could kill you, you know. So that what, but that she kind of had no choice in the moment.
Hmm.
I mean, it does become, I think it was just more to create another connection between the two girls. Again, like I said, you're right in that is their relationship that interesting? Well, it's interesting in that the only reason that it's interesting is because of the age that it forms.
You see, I don't. I'm gonna be real with you. I have no friends from that time of my life that I still interact with regularly. I've got a few Facebook friends around of people,
No, but
but it
at the
was like
time, all of
I don't get it. Like I'm gonna. I don't get the concept.
no,
Period.
no, I don't have any friends from that time in my life. What I mean is to the girls at the time, like it was a time, she had a crush on the brother, and this was a big deal to them. Like all of this was a big deal because of the ages that they were at. Like because they were so young,
I get
it
it.
was a big deal.
Okay, that makes a bit more
Not so
sense to me.
much that like I'm not saying that they're going to be friends forever and be bonded for life. I mean, like you, I don't really have any friends left from that time of my life either, and I don't really consider this a problem either. It's just a thing. It happened.
Hmm.
Whatever. I have friends from other periods of my life so I'm doing all right. But Dennou Coil, that's not exactly what I meant. Not that that relationship was something that was going to be so significant to them for like their entire lives. With that, what happened in the story was significant because it was only a big deal because of their age. Like
Hmm.
their age is what made it a big deal. You know, from an adult perspective, a little girl having a crush on older boy and kissing him on the cheek doesn't mean anything. But from the perspective of the people who are that age, it's a big deal. And then it becomes, kind of it becomes frozen in place with tragedy. She gets jealous that some girl is going to steal her brother away, and then the brother dies. So some are never really given any time to resolve, and she's too emotionally immature to ever really work through it properly, especially because Yasuko moves away and then comes back later on when Isako is already trying to cultivate some sort of image as an ice queen, to hide how upset she is from everybody.
Hmm.
All of this stuff going on.
Hmm.
Uh, it's not so much that I think they're destined to be friends forever. Although on the other hand, if something this significant happened, maybe. But that's a little bit different. At, if the events of Dennou Coil happened to me, well, then maybe I would be best friends forever. I can't really say.
You see, I
But
don't
that's
know
not what
either.
I meant. But that's not what I meant.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I can say I did enjoy. Um. I'm trying to think. I did enjoy um, Dennou Coil, and I do consider it above decent to good work. I honestly had some problems with the plot line um, when it comes to, especially when it comes to the things I talked about earlier in the live stream, how characters are interacting with each other, how how the episode structure was structured, especially in the middle there, because honestly, um, even though the Daichi episodes are kind of interesting, because he's got such a spirit to him, and he's probably my favorite character. Um, it doesn't
That's
quite,
a fair pick.
it doesn't quite like overall do anything for me. That's the best way to put it.
I I just loved a lot of it. I loved the whole idea. I love the whole idea behind the world. I love the aesthetic of Dennou Coil. I mentioned people call it like Studio Ghibli cyberpunk. It's really I think it looks a lot more like Mamoru Hosoda, if anyone.
Yeah.
This that's what the style reminds me of. That's the other thing about Dennou Coil, and this is another reason it makes a very interesting contrast with Blame. By the way, uh, the it's Dennou Coil is really weird in that it's hard to call it a cyberpunk is so dependent on its aesthetic and its tone that it's hard to call Dennou Coil, which is all in all a pretty upbeat, optimistic show, although it can get dark, but mostly as taken as a whole, it's such an upbeat, optimistic, happy show. It's hard to call Dennou Coil cyberpunk, even though thematically it hits like all of the cyberpunk, hallmarks. The it explores like what is a person, the distinction between the human body and technology. Where does one end and when does the other begin? It has corrupt corporations in the background
Hmm.
performing illegal human experimentation. There's even a kind of a subtle dystopic element in the world. You know, like it has all of those elements, but it's so not aesthetically traditionally cyberpunk. Like I'm not sure if you could quite call it cyberpunk. So it's interesting. It's like a cyberpunk in everything, but the most important aspect of cyberpunk, which is how it looks.
I describe it more as post cyberpunk. So post cyberpunk as a genre is relatively small, but it's definite. Like it's got enough markers to it to be a definite genre. It is where you have all the technology of a cyberpunk like civilization or a story, but the social structure has been maintained and people could reasonably like grow up in this society and not be like a druggy slicer with a bad Australian accent, cutting people for chips,
Yeah,
credits in
yeah.
the
I
in
mean,
the opium den or
that's
whatever.
true. But it's not only the fact that it has like the technology of the cyberpunk world. It's also the fact like it has all of the earmarks, like the corrupt corporation in the
Mhm.
background, human experimentation. That theme of exploring like what's real and what isn't. What is the measure of a virtual life type of thing.
Mhm.
Like all of those elements are in Dennou Coil, but even despite all of that, because like you said, there's just one problem. It's that you can imagine children growing up in this world living relatively healthy lives,
Mhm.
which means it's hard to think of it as a cyber.
Yep. All right. Well, I think it's been a good experiment so far. Um, for this, I think we'll do it again in a couple weeks. Bar One Studios says he's doing a Kickstarter, and we might talk to him about what he's planning to do. Just because it's like that's like half the reason I started doing this stuff to promote other people and friends of the Superversive's work, as well as Superversive's work. Don't be shy about contacting me on Facebook. I shit post under my own name, Benjamin Wheeler. Um, I do though. Uh, so, and it's my account too. I got family on that. They see me do it. They go, Ben,
Okay.
why'd you post this? This seems a little angry. I'm
I'm
like,
on
I am
Facebook,
angry.
but I pretty much only ever post in right of center authors under the thesis that one day I'm probably going to want to get it. Uh, and then at the very least, I don't want people will have to listen through long, boring live streams of my annoying voice droning on with somebody else about anime if they want to nail me for my for something at this point. You probably won't find it on Facebook unless you hack into the right of center authors, which
Right,
Google can do at any time. But
right.
until then,
So it's like a guy told me. All artists are either communists or fascists. You're not a communist, Anthony. You've already screwed yourself. So let's just be who you are meant to be.
It's
Get
not. Look, it's not so much that I'm like, I'm not being myself, as I'm just like, you know what, I'm not going to talk about anything if I don't have to. I'm not going to lie, but
actually like
that's
any.
why
Mhm.
right of center authors is a godsend, because right of center authors keeps me sane somewhat. Yeah, to the point where you could call it sane, I guess.
Right. Honestly, though, anytime I'm looking for a job, I just hide all my posts until I get the job, and then
It's not a
make them.
terrible idea, but
Then I make them public
eh,
again when it's
I
too
don't
late.
I don't think I have anything that bad. I do. Fun fact: I do have a blog that I use under a username, and you could probably find it if you looked me up pretty easily. However, the reason name isn't so much because like I'm trying to hide it and it's my big secret shame so much as I don't want to be like the first thing that comes up when you stick my name on Google. It's also a totally worthless blog. Like it's entirely for me. I don't really care who does or doesn't read it. I have like I have like 10 commenters and I use it to complain about shit. Uh, so if I'm not going to tell you what the anonymous name is, I'll tell you, Ben, off of this. I'm just not going to tell anybody on the live stream. It's boring anyway. There's really like if you were to read it, you would probably be disappointed if you were looking for something juicy. But yeah, I have it, and the reason it's under a pseudonymous name is just because I don't want it to be like the first thing that comes up when you Google me. If
Oh, dude,
you
I've
try and
used
cancel me,
your name several times.
if
It's too
people
late.
are oh no, no, if people are gonna try and cancel me, I want them to work at it a little bit.
Hmm,
Now, put in more than the bare minimum if you're gonna cancel me.
right. All right. Though, though, if anyone cancels me, I'm going straight to a lawyer. Uh, just straight up. Um, especially at work or something like that. Like I will be going after people who did it. Um,
That's the only thing to do. That's absolutely what I would do.
right. Like here's the thing. They'll only
With
stomp
that
on you
said, I'm not
if you
seeking it
let them.
out.
No, absolutely
What was
not.
that?
Like I'm not a provocateur mostly. Um, sometimes I kind of am. But not to
You're not a
people.
Vox Day though. You
That's
know,
true. But like
you're
people,
not a Vox Day whose most recent thing is racism is not a sin. To be clear, by the way, I am not intending to get into a full discussion about this. I'm bringing this up partially for shit talk value. But I've been reading Vox Day for years, and originally he was. I swear to you, I wish I could find this article. I couldn't. I tried years later. He had an article where he was arguing that he wasn't a racist, that it turned into people who preach anti-racism are, like the devil. To now, the current state of Vox Day is racism is not a sin. This is a transformation.
you see
Now,
here, that's the thing
so
though. Like it's a provocative statement, but there's
I'm not saying that Vox doesn't. Before you like try, I'm not trying to argue. I'm not saying Vox doesn't mean it or that he doesn't have anything he could use to back it up. I'm just pointing out that Vox didn't start out this way. So remember, all you people who hate Vox Day, you created him.
yes.
He is your fault. This is what I
Yes.
remind, especially the right. Whenever the right complains about Vox Day, I'm like, I've been reading Vox Day for not long, like Vox has been around for a long time, but I've been reading him for a few years. And originally, he used to deny being a racist. Now he is out there promoting racism is not a sin. This is all you. This is your fault. You did this.
All
Yeah,
right. It's true though. It's true. Like it's one of those like weird twists of fate where it starts off as, I am a culturally normal person. And then they came for the churches and demanded the churches preach a satanic gospel. And he's like, all right, rolls up
yeah.
his sleeves, and then he starts memeing, and it's like, no.
Yeah.
Oh well,
Early Vox Day is relatively tame compared to current day Vox Day.
it's fantastic. All right, I gotta go do some other stuff, guys. Anthony, it's always a pleasure. Thank you to those who join in. Bar One Studios, contact me on Facebook if you want to do something. And then next week, whatever we do at the end of it, have a manga or anime. I'm going to limit you to 12 or so episodes because 26 episodes really ruined my schedule last week. Um, and
Yeah,
I
that
will.
didn't even occur to me. Sorry.
Yeah, it's
Like it,
okay, but it's like. eh,
it
anyway, um, what we'll do is I will also have something to recommend. Um, yeah, Bar One Studios goes, I was always slow down children at play, and now I'm hashtag run them down. All right. Have a good night, guys. Thank you for joining us.